I've got a GOAT format tier list for you, but not just any tier list. Welcome to GOAT Duels. I'm ACP, and today I'm going to be ranking every competitively viable deck in GOAT format, but instead of from best to worst, we're ranking them from easiest to hardest. So the idea here is that, hey, maybe you're new to GOAT format and you want to know, like, what's an easy deck to get into. So I'm going to be ranking those for you, or maybe even want to know what the hardest decks to play are if you like a challenge. So this is all personal opinion, of course, but I think most of these opinions are pretty in line with most other people who play GOAT format. So you're going to do control decks first, then some aggro decks, and then some combo decks. So let's start with GOAT Control. So GOAT Control, I think, is definitely one of the hardest decks to play in GOAT format. It kind of always has been, and I think it still is. And that's because it has a lot of options, but the cards are sort of less powerful in a vacuum than a lot of the other decks. So because of that, there's a lot of sort of manipulating your cards to get max value out of them, figuring out if it's time to wait around for more cards or to sort of push forward and try to be aggressive. So I know GOAT Control is the hardest deck for me to play. I know for most other people, they'd probably also say it's the hardest deck for them to play. Then we've got Standard Chaos, right? Just your deck with Chaos Sorcerer, Thunder Dragon, Phoenix Windblast, or Raigeki Break, usually Phoenix Windblast, Card Destruction, Night Assailant, all that stuff. I'm gonna put it in easy. I was tempted to put it in easiest, but I realized I was being maybe a little biased. So I'm gonna put it in easy. There's a reason why that this deck is very popular with newer players, and that's because it has a very straightforward game plan, right? The cards mostly play themselves. Now there are still some cards that you kind of have to know again how to play to get max value out of them, whether it's like Card Destruction or Chaos Sorcerer or Night Assailant, or even Phoenix Windblast. There are definitely some decisions to be made, but most of these decisions are pretty straightforward and easy in comparison to the other decks in GOAT format. Then here we have Chaos Control. I didn't know what image to use for this, but I just went with Metamorphosis. So it's definitely not easy. I think I'm going to put it in hard, and the reason why is because when you have both Chaos Sorcerer and Metamorphosis in the same deck, figuring out like which one you should use to deal with the threat and which one you should save, that can be kind of tricky. This deck right now, I think it is a little, I don't know, it's kind of hard to play the meta. There's a lot of stuff to worry about. So yeah, I think this is kind of hard to play. Note here that with this tier list, I'm only talking about how hard these decks are to use in game, not how hard they are to build necessarily. We're assuming that you already have a good deck list. But Angel Chaos, I would also put in hard. It's pretty similar to Chaos Control in terms of how it plays. So I think wherever you rank one of these decks, you kind of need to rank the other. And then for Monarchs, at least the current builds, I would probably also put in easy. I like this deck a lot, and I think it's a very approachable deck for newer players. Now, if you are playing Cyberstein in your deck, yes, there are some decisions to be made there, like what turn do you play Stein, what do you get with your Stein, all of that stuff. But other than that one thing, pretty much every other decision in the deck is pretty straightforward. You don't need to be a genius to figure out that, oh, I should tribute my Gravekeeper Spy for a Monarch or my Sanguine for a Monarch. Most of it's pretty straightforward. You see a monster, play Zaborg. You see a bunch of Acros, play a Mobius. You don't necessarily have to know a lot to play that deck, but still really fun deck. It's definitely a deck that I like. And then for Chaos Return, I'm probably either going to put in average or hard. And we might move around some of these. I'm going to say probably average. So I think different components of the deck are easy versus hard to play. I think the monster component of the deck is pretty easy. Like, just setting monsters like Tokochi and Spy, I think that's pretty straightforward. Players will pick that up. But then knowing how to use your traps, like your Solemn Judgment and Return, I think that can be kind of hard. So I think it kind of like cancels out, and then we end up with average. I think you definitely have some players like Dingo Sig who have kind of mastered this deck on a level like way higher than most people. So maybe it should be in hard. But I would say it's probably about par for the course in GOAT format. It's definitely easier to play than GOAT Control, but definitely harder to play than like your standard Chaos. Then we're going to talk about Flip Control. although Flip Control doesn't really see a ton of play anymore, this is basically Tsukiyomi, Mask of Darkness, Solemn Judgment, Dakochi's, that sort of thing. I'm going to say probably easy or average. I think maybe average. Now, there are definitely some hands that the deck gets that are easy to play. Like, if you open, like, Mask, Tsukiyomi, Solemn, and, like, 3 other chops or whatever, that hand kind of plays itself. But then, like, the deck also has to play around Crossout a lot, so I feel like that can be kind of hard. And just sort of figuring out which monster to play can be hard. If you don't have Solemn, figuring out how many traps you should set could be kind of hard. But yeah, this is kind of like average bordering on easy. It kind of depends. For Warriors, now I know a lot of people say this deck is easy to play. I'm going to put it in average, but I almost want to put it in hard. And the reason why is because I see so many people make mistakes with Warriors. Now, again, let me know in the comments what you think. Again, I always hear people act like this deck is easy to play, but then I see people misplay with it so a lot. So, like, a big part of the mistakes that people make are turn 1. Like, I think the default for a lot of people is if they open, like, Blade Knight 5 traps, just go summon Blade Knight, set all the traps. But you often actually don't want to do that, especially if they don't know what you're playing yet, because you don't want to play Blade Knight on turn 1, and then they know to set, like, their Spy instead of their Dakochi, or to set their Sangan instead of their Dakochi or whatever. So I think, like, a lot of Warrior players are, like, too aggressive on turn 1. But then also, like, later in the game, speaking of aggression, you have to know, like, oh, should I play around Mirror Torrential, or do I need to push for damage and hope they don't have it? So I think there are actually a lot of decision points. Obviously, Reinforcement of the Army just gives you a decision in general, like, which Warrior do you get? Even if they have a face-down monster, it's like, oh, should I get Blade Knight, which has more attack, or should I get the Mystic Swordsman level 2 just in case it's Gravekeeper Spy? And then for Earth Rush, I haven't played a lot of this deck, but I think this is on the easy side. I mean, you look at the lineup, it's mostly just, like, summon monster attack. It's definitely easier to play than Warriors. Although, I mean, Giant Rat gives you some options. I'm going to put this in easy. I might move it later. Any of these I might move later. I don't want to have, like, fat tiers where I put, like, everything in average or everything in easy or something. For Chaos Recruiter, that's what this is, Chaos Recruiter. I think I'm also going to put an average. And the reason why is the deck, like, is a little underpowered. And, like, figuring out, like, when it's safe to creature swap, like, that's a skill, obviously, because, like, if you play it at the wrong time, your opponent just chains goats and you're kind of screwed. Although everything else in the deck is kind of easy. I don't know. Maybe we'll put this in easy. Because I think creature swap can be kind of tough to play. Figuring out, like, how to actually get lights and darks in your grave and, like, playing around Kaiku, that can be kind of tough. So it's hard to say. Again, I might move some of these around. Zombies, I would say, yeah, most builds I'd say are pretty easy. Like, all the monsters are pretty easy to use. All the spells and traps are pretty easy to use. I mean, yeah, you have decisions to make with Giant Rat and Pyramid Turtle, but usually they're very straightforward, right? Like, you always know what your Pyramid Turtle is going to get. Like, I don't know, I think I'm actually going to put this in easiest. I think I'm going to put it in easiest. Because I just don't feel like the deck has a lot of decisions. Like, yes, it has some. You have to know how to use your swaps. You have to know how to use your Book of Life. It's hard to say. For Emissary Aggro, I think I'm also going to put in easy. Just because, in general, I would say, other than Warriors, most of the aggro decks are pretty easy to play in GOAT format. And actually, I think I am just going to put Chaos Recruiter in easy. Because, yeah, like, having one hard decision to me, like, doesn't make the deck not easy. And then I'm also, I think, going to put Gravekeepers, probably easy or easiest. Just because, like, their plan is very straightforward. Like, it doesn't take a genius to, like, activate Necro Valley and try to stop your opponent from doing anything and just summon monsters and attack. Like, you definitely do have some decisions. You have to decide what to get with your Gravekeeper Spy. If you don't have something like Solemn or Magic Jam or whatever, you have to figure out, like, okay, how many back rows can I set with my Necro Valley to play around Heavy Storm? So it's hard to say. For Burn, I think I'm going to put that in average. I could almost see this being an easy. I feel like I'm just wanting to put everything in easy. But yeah, the reason why it's average is because like the game plan is straightforward, obviously, right? That's easy. You always know what you're trying to do. If you're playing Panda Bird, you have to like balance a little because it's like, yeah, I'm trying to like burn them with just desserts, but I'm also trying to like attack with Panda. So there's kind of like a little bit of a dual game plan there. But just knowing with your burn cards, like whether you should save them or whether you should just play them right away. In general, I feel like a lot of burn players just use their burn cards too quickly. Like you don't always have to just set all your secret barrels like turn 1 or whatever, and then use them on turn 2. Like you don't have to do that. So yeah, I'd say it's average. I'd say especially now with people siding a lot against burn, I think that makes it kind of tough. So I'd say like maybe the game 1s are easy, but the game 2 and 3s are kind of hard. So I think we get average overall. For Rescue Cat, I think I'm also just going to say easy. Just because, again, the gameplay is so straightforward. Activate True Grenade, Will Cat, attack for game. Like, yeah, that's a pretty easy combo. Now, I think building Rescue Cat can be hard, but I think playing it is easy. And again, we're only talking about how easy these decks are to play, not how hard they are to build. I think for Library FTK, I'm going to put it in hard. Just because I know people might like get upset with me for this. They might get upset with me for putting Library FTK on the list at all. Some people just want to pretend that it doesn't exist. But it does exist, and I think it is kind of hard to play just because knowing when to play your Toon Tables, when to play your Thunder Dragons, like how to use those cards with Convulsion of Nature to manipulate the top of your deck. Knowing on turn 1, like if you have kind of an mediocre hand, like, oh, should I just go for the combo? Or should I just try to like stall for a couple of turns and accumulate some more cards? I think that can be tough. And yeah, I mean, there is a reason that people don't want to play this deck. Obviously, part of it is because it feels lame, and part of it is because it's hard to play. It really is. For Reasoning, that's definitely the hardest up here with Goat Control. I didn't really plan out this tier list in advance, but I did know these two were going to be in hardest. And the reason why is because Reasoning Gate is like the only deck where a lot of the strategy is based on probabilities. And that makes it hard. It's sort of the difference between, I don't know, playing... It's the difference between playing a game with perfect information versus like playing poker or whatever. Like with poker, you have to think about probabilities. And same thing with Reasoning Gate. Even like side decking, knowing like, oh, my opponent called this level in game 1, so I should side that out and switch it with a different level. A lot of that is hard. There are a lot of mind games going on. There's a lot of probability going on. And because of that, I think that makes Reasoning Gate the hardest deck to play. I think it's even harder than Goat Control. And just from my own observations of watching people play this deck, I see so many people make mistakes with it. Again, so some of this is kind of based on personal opinion. Some of it's just based on observation. So yeah, these two are the hardest decks in GOAT format. I think Empty Jar is definitely... I think Empty Jar is average. I know it's like the few Empty Jar players might get mad at me for saying this and might go, no, it's really hard. But the Empty Jar combo, again, like it's pretty straightforward. Just going Shallow Grave Bookateu over and over again. Like, once you've done it once, you know how to do it. Like, yes, there are some hard things, right? Like, knowing like, oh, I need to mind control this Set Faith to combo off or whatever. Stuff like that can be hard. Like, in the early game, if you don't have any of your jars, knowing, like, okay, how am I going to stall here to get to my combo? Yes, that can be hard. But I feel like the core combo is pretty easy, and then there are a few things, like using Mind Control and getting value out of your tomatoes and stuff that can be hard. And last we have Pac-Man, which, to be honest, I think is kind of a bad deck, but people play it. It has done well in tournaments in the past, so we're going to put it on the list. I think Pac-Man is easy, if not easiest. Like, again, the deck kind of plays itself. It's just set dudes, set back rows. Like, do you ever really have decisions in Pac-Man? I don't think you do. Like, what decisions do you have in this deck? Yeah, I literally don't think you ever have decisions, except, like, maybe playing around a couple of cards. Like, oh, I'm gonna not set my Deslocuta so that I play around Crossout. I don't know. I think this is among the easiest decks to play. Maybe I'm being too hard on it. Maybe it should be an easy. But yeah, this is the final list. Let me see if there's anything that I think should be moved around a bit. Yeah, I think all these look right. I don't know. I could see maybe Flip Control going to easy. Because I don't think you really have a ton of decisions to make either. Kind of like Pac-Man. In a way, Flip Control is a little similar to Pac-Man. Yeah, let me know what you guys think. I think I'm gonna call it a day here. But yeah, this is how I would rank the GOAT format decks from easiest to hardest. This is rough. I didn't put a ton of thought into this. But yeah, I think most decks are like easy to average. But I think a lot of the more popular decks are actually kind of hard. Right? Like GOAT Control is pretty hard. Really any Chaos deck with Metamorphosis in it, I think is kind of hard. Reasoning Gate is also very hard. So yeah, I hope this helps you guys. Let me know what you think. And thanks for watching.